Hi everybody, Mike Peters here, your friendly stroke survivor, and thank you for coming to my show. And just to remind you, we are live on Facebook and live on YouTube. And as you know, I'm big all over the world, especially in America. So if you're watching, please give me a hi and comment. And I've got a great guest today. Well, I hope he is. His name Matt O'Grady, and he's from the Stroke Association, and he's the Policy, Information and Campaigns Officer. And I'm sure he'll tell us all about it. So I'll welcome Matt O'Grady. Hello, Matt.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Good, thank you. So I
Thank you
will bring
for.
up comments. You have to let me know if you can see them. So first one is Salu from Inglewood, California.
Yeah, I can see that. That's great.
So
Hello.
Salu is a caregiver for her husband, Tom, who's got the best smile in the world. So who is Matt O'Grady? I almost said Paul O'Grady then.
No, not much in common, unfortunately. Not quite the charisma or celebrity experience.
So who are you?
So my name's Matt. I'm the Policy, Information and Campaigns Officer for the Stroke Association in Wales. So that means that my job really is to work for the Stroke Association on our work on influencing politics and health organisations and local government in Wales so that they fully understand the needs of stroke survivors living in this country and are passing legislation and taking actions to really ensure that the needs of stroke survivors are fully reflected in what they do.
Great. And before that, can you tell me a bit about what you did before?
So previously, I worked for a housing charity that promoted equality and diversity in the housing sector. Before that, I was doing something very similar to this role, so policy and campaigns for a charity called Scope and their work in Wales. And before that, I worked for a Welsh politician, which was great because it gave me a really good insight as to how the what's now called the Welsh Parliament, what was called the Welsh Assembly at the time, worked and how laws in Wales are made, how the government is held to account, and what the role of individual Senate members is in that work as well. And prior to that, I was a student and a barman, but that's probably less relevant right now.
And you were originally from Somerset.
Originally from Somerset, so I'm constantly working on in work. Well, I work in Wales constantly. My role in our team is to make sure that Wales is really understood and what we do in Wales as well. But I'm English at heart and now a permanent resident of Wales for all my sins.
And why the Stroke Association?
So stroke has been a subject I've really known about for quite some time. My grandmother had a stroke when she was about 55. It was caused by atrial fibrillation. I must have only been about 5 at the time. So I don't really remember any of that. But what I do remember is that she had left-sided weakness for the rest of her life. She died last year. No, actually, technically a year before now. So she was spent a long time as a stroke survivor and never regained that use of her left arm. And it was something as a child, you're always very curious about why is this the case? And it was explained to me, it was a stroke, and it wasn't something I really understood what it was, but at the time, but certainly understood what the impact was on her and her life, and something which she never fully recovered from. And meant that, when an opportunity came up to really get a good understanding of what this means in Wales and what the challenges are for stroke survivors in Wales, and to get involved in campaigns to benefit people who, like my gran, it was a fantastic opportunity for me to join a great cause.
I don't know whether you know, but I'm in the process of becoming an ambassador for the Stroke Association. And part of what I want to do is go into schools and educate children as to the signs of stroke. Do you think that's a good idea?
Yeah, ultimately I do. I think, one of the things that struck me about this job is how many people, when you speak to them, will say, "Oh yeah, my cousin, my sister, my dad had a stroke," and have that family connection to stroke. But like I said, don't really understand what that means in terms of the causes, how they can prevent their own risks of stroke, how the link to that for people like children is things such as healthy diet and exercise, and that's a message that can never really be drummed into children enough. Certainly, something that I think everyone should be more aware of, and therefore creating that awareness among children about what stroke is, the symptoms of stroke, and ultimately that fast message as well, because they can be the people who are around their loved ones when something happens, and making sure that they're aware. Phone 999, it's an emergency, again, can be life-saving changes.
And I think they'll take it a bit serious if there was a man in a wheelchair there.
Yeah, and I think the symptoms of stroke can vary so much between individuals. So my gran, like I said, she had left-sided weakness, but other than that, she was fairly well for the rest of her life. But for other people, it can be very, very minor or very, very severe. And being able to show people what that spectrum looks like and talk to people about things such as aphasia, and some of the other issues that we know people can face throughout the rest of their lives. But also, that message of hope as well, that recovery is something that people can make. People can make good recoveries if they can get access to the services they need. And that's what our role is as a stroke association, is making sure governments, hospitals, local authorities understand what they can do to help stroke survivors make that recovery.
So Jerry says good day from Texas.
Good day, Jerry.
And his show yesterday was great. And he was talking about aphasia with a doctor who had aphasia, and how hospital people, didn't know what aphasia was.
Yeah, definitely. And we know that there is that lack of awareness of many of the effects of stroke among a lot of people, really. And that's why access to those specialists with strong understandings is so important.
Because I didn't have aphasia, but the patient next to me was being fed through a tube,
Mm.
and I got upset the day before I came out of hospital. He had a chocolate mousse, and it broke my heart because he'd been watching us all eat for months.
Yeah, it's something, like I said, really struck me, as learning about stroke. Like I said, came into it with a little bit of knowledge, came into this job with a bit of knowledge, but there's so much more to learn. And you hear all these stories about people whose lives have been turned upside down by stroke. But like I said, there are those messages of hope and people's great stories of recoveries as well.
Oh, Beckham Walker says hello. She's my main carer,
Hi, Betham.
but she's not been too well this week. So get well soon. I need you back. So where are we with stroke in Wales, please?
So where we are with stroke in Wales, and it's a really interesting time for stroke in Wales, because coming up to just before the start of the pandemic, we were getting towards the end of what's called the Stroke Delivery Plan, which is the main Welsh Government document about what their plans are for stroke across the country, and what they see as the future of services, what their priorities are. That was due to come to an end at the start of this year. The pandemic came along, so they've decided to extend that slightly while they deal with other pressing health concerns, but also consider what the successor to that stroke delivery plan is going to be. From our point of view, we did a big piece of work last year with a group known as the Cross-Party Group on Stroke, who are a group of politicians who are interested in stroke in the Welsh Parliament. And we conducted an inquiry into the Welsh Government stroke delivery plan, trying to understand what about it had worked, what about it hadn't been implemented, what the options were for the future, and how we can ensure whatever replaces it really drives home some of those improvements in our health services for people who experience stroke and stroke survivors as well. What we found in that inquiry was there were a number of things which hadn't been fully implemented, and there was a lack of progress on some issues. What we found with prevention was actually there had been quite a lot of progress and quite a lot of good work, and it was quite positive. But on some of the other side of things, such as some of the acute care, so thrombolysis, which is clot busting drugs, development of these new hyperacute stroke units that we want to see, and on rehab as well, there was still a lot of variation, a lot of progress still to be made, and a lot of the commitments that were made in the stroke delivery plan hadn't been fully realised. So what we're pushing for now, and the state of things at the moment, is that Stroke Association is campaigning and working with stroke survivors to try and make sure that the Welsh Government commits to a new national plan for stroke to replace the stroke delivery plan when it comes to an end in March 2022. And that's been really the big piece of work that we've been doing over the last year or so since the publication of that cross-party group report. We're getting a lot of support from that, from politicians in Wales, from across the political spectrum as well. And of course, the big other thing happening in Wales this year is the Welsh Parliament elections happening in May. And we're going to be doing a lot of work during that period as well to raise awareness of why we need a new national plan with politicians in Wales, with candidates during that election, to make sure that the next Welsh Government, whatever the political makeup of it is, really understands why we need that new national plan for stroke and what it should contain.
And do you think whoever gets in, because it's a lottery, isn't it? You know, it's Labour at the moment, but it could be any of 4 others. Will they take it as seriously, do you think? Do you think this cross-party stroke has helped them?
I think the cross-party group on stroke's definitely been something really, really valuable over the last year or so. It's been really valuable in terms of trying to raise awareness of how well the stroke implementation plan, a stroke delivery plan, has been implemented. I think that there's still a lot of work to be done, and we need to make sure that we've got politicians from across the political spectrum so that we can really drive home that message and make sure that actually whatever the next government is, whatever the political makeup of it is that we have that support. And we've been doing a lot of other stuff over the last year or so as well to try and create new relationships with Senedd members. Lots of them really keen to engage with us, really receptive to some of our messages, and have a really strong understanding of why stroke is such an important issue. But ultimately, it's about making sure that whoever is in charge after the next election really understands that. You're on mute again, Mike.
For my American friends, what is Senedd?
So the Senedd, Welsh Parliament and the Senedd, they're the same thing. I apologise, I use those terms quite interchangeably, but the Welsh Parliament is the Senedd, and it's just an interchangeable term. One's the Welsh term, one's the English term. About the only word of Welsh I speak, I should warn you.
I'm sure you know others, probably swear words.
I actually don't know any Welsh language swear words, which is disappointing now I think about it.
Oh, that's good news. My carer said I'll be back on Monday. Oh, I'm so glad. So I went to one cross-party stroke meeting and I actually asked a question, and it was very interesting that they were taking it seriously. Can you tell me any more about the acute stroke hospitals, please?
So the hyperacute stroke units, yeah. So essentially, there's been some work that's been done over the last few years to look at what the best model is of providing stroke care. And in a couple of places, mostly in England, they've gone through a process called reconfiguration, where essentially they've decreased the number of stroke units they have and created new, larger regional stroke units that have access to a better level of staff and all the right sorts of treatments and expertise, so that all of the staff there have a real expertise in stroke. What the research has shown is that that's decreased mortality from stroke, so more people are surviving stroke, lowering people's length of stay in hospital, which is obviously really great for those individuals, but also ensuring people are leaving hospital with less disability as well. So really all of those things that you want to see through any health system. The current iteration of the stroke delivery plan, the current version of it, says that the Welsh Government wants to move towards these hyperacute stroke units. And we've been involved in a lot of those discussions with health boards over the last few years. What we haven't seen is a great deal of progress to turning that into a reality. There's been a lot of talking about it. I know of at least one health board where they have put forward some firm proposals, what they wanted to do, but there was no money to back it up within the health board as well. So we haven't seen any of that progress being made. Obviously, then the pandemic's come along and that's put a pause on any of that work as well, causing even further delays. what we believe is that actually that should really be one of the big priorities of a new national stroke plan. We know what the answer is to improving these stroke services. It is these hyperacute stroke units. The other key thing is making sure that rehabilitation goes alongside it as well. There's absolutely no point in giving people the best possible acute stroke care to then go back out to the community and not then provide them with the right support as well. We've got to make sure those improvements go
I
alongside.
think that's where I found 5 months in hospital, and the doctor said, "Why do you want something for your mental health? A stroke does not affect your mental health." So, and
Yeah,
then I came out of hospital, and then it's just you're forgotten about. You're given 6 sessions for your with a psychiatrist, and then that's it. And then I found the Stroke Association, who have been absolutely amazing for me.
well, I'm glad to hear you've had a good experience from us. But yeah, sadly, unfortunately, it's fairly reflective of the experience many people tell us about. Many people tell us that they feel abandoned when they leave hospital, and that those community services aren't up to the standard which ultimately people want them to be. The psychology is a great example. We know that in many stroke units, psychology is practically non-existent, but we know that actually quite a large number of people who experience stroke feel over the course of the next year or so end up with depression or anxiety or longer term mental health issues as well, where actually trying to identify those people and provide them with support should be one of the priorities of any rehabilitation service.
I think something I fight for is mental health, because I describe it as a bereavement. You've lost half your body.
Yeah, and we know why it can have such a serious effect on people's mental health. Stroke turns lives upside down in an instant. We know that, but also not just for the individual, but for carers as well, and making sure that they're able to get support they need as well. But that's possibly a different matter. And Jerry agrees with you, apparently.
He agrees with you and even me.
Yeah.
He's the
Um,
right character.
Yeah, and we've been doing what we can to try and raise awareness of some of that mental health impact as well. And we've seen that during the pandemic as well. Pandemic has hit people's mental health hard. I think that's something that's not unique to stroke survivors, but actually when you combine in people trying to make a recovery from stroke in this very difficult, very challenging environment, not necessarily being able to access some of the other services that they need. So we did a survey of stroke survivors across Wales and the UK last summer, to look at what people's experiences have been during the pandemic. And we found that about half of people in Wales had had appointments for therapy, so speech and language therapy, physiotherapy, occupational therapy. About half of people have had appointments cancelled during the pandemic. Those appointments are the ones which are really important to enable people to make those recoveries. And it's not something you can really delay as well. We know that people make better recoveries the earlier they receive that treatment and support as well.
I mean, I fought to go to Landock Day Hospital, the stroke hospital. I went once, and then this pandemic came along, and then I was kicked out.
Yeah, and unfortunately, those are the kind of stories that we hear about and what people's negative experiences are. Have you had any of the virtual therapies as well? So anything over the phone or internet?
Only with the Stroke Association, with Stephanie, with Movement to Music, and we meet every Monday as a group.
Steph is great, and her groups are great as well. But what we have seen is only about a quarter of people we surveyed said that they'd had therapies provided virtually or over the phone. So when you've got half of people having appointments cancelled and only a quarter of people having it, on the other hand, provided in a different way, that means that there's a real risk of there being this lost cohort of people in the middle who aren't able to access any of the services that really they need to make the best possible recovery. And that's something we're really concerned about. We've also got the additional pressure on some of those services coming from people who might have had COVID and are having symptoms of that and need things such as physiotherapy. So there's a real risk of a pressure on those services, and something that we've been raising with government. I've been working with other charities to raise as well, because it's a real cause for concern. We
As
want
I know, I got pretty close to some of my physios.
to, yeah, and we want to make sure everyone gets those services.
And is the Stroke Association rich?
No, no, we're not rich, unfortunately. Like every charity in the UK, the pandemic has hit our fundraising. So things like our events fundraising, I remember just before the pandemic happened, we had a 5K run event in Cardiff, what we call the resolution runs. That happened literally days before the country went in lockdown. So we had one in Cardiff, but our one that was scheduled for North Wales had to be cancelled. And obviously, we've done none of that kind of events fundraising since then. That's been the same across the UK, and that has an impact. And as a organisation, we're having to adjust to what that new funding, not funding, new funding arrangements look like, what our new budgets need to be, and it's a challenging time for every charity in the UK, I think, at the moment.
And did the government give you loads of money?
That is something I believe we've had some funding off government. I don't work in our fundraising team. That's slightly above my pay grade. It's certainly, whatever money we're getting, we could always do with more money. So, we have all our donation lines are open, as it were. And, ultimately, we want to make sure that we're there as a charity long term to continue providing the support that people need.
And money is, it's not only if they worked out how much millions it costs after a stroke. So if they put the money in for preventative measures, that would be amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and that's a point we make a lot to government. I think one of the challenges is that the system isn't very joined up. If the health service gives somebody a thrombectomy, for example, it costs them about £12,000, whereas if that can save potentially tens, hundreds of £1,000s in people's ongoing social care, but of course that's a different pot of money. So you struggle to get that investment in the things that can lower people's needs longer term, because that's coming from a completely different pot of money, and people don't always see the need to invest in it. And it's a point we continue to make. It's a point, a lot of organizations make for that exact same reason, that prevention is better than treatment. Treatment is better than long-term rehab. But ultimately, we need to make sure that all of those options are available for people.
So do you think I should go for First Minister of Wales?
I think that anybody who has an interest in politics, who's really wants to get involved in politics, should do so. I'm a great believer in the power of politics, and the elections are a great opportunity. Whether your politics are suitable, Mike, I haven't seen your manifesto, so I'm not going to comment.
But you're a graduate in politics, aren't you?
Yeah. I studied at Swansea University, degree in politics, a lofty 2-2, because I had a lot of other things I wanted to do at the time, which
like drinking.
No comment. Lots of other things that I'm sure fall afoul of our prevention activity as well. But yeah, it's a really interesting time politically with things like the elections this year, and it's doing politics at uni's led me to places which have been really interesting, and it's something I'm really glad that I chose to do.
Well, another friend of mine from the Stroke Association is Nicola Dando. She's been absolutely amazing to me.
Yeah, Nicola's absolutely lovely. It's someone who used to run into in the office quite a lot. Went back in the days where we had an office, but unfortunately, the pandemic has proven one thing to the Stroke Association. It's that ultimately we don't need an office anymore, because we have been working virtually. It's been working really, really well. But unfortunately, it means that I'm not seeing people like Steph and Nicola quite so much.
And you had a lovely office overlooking a castle.
I wouldn't describe it as a lovely office. It was a lovely view in an office that felt aggressively like a call centre at times, having worked in a call centre. But it was full of fantastic people who were really committed to the cause, and was a great place to work just for those reasons. And the other reason it was a great place to work is there's a bakery in Caerphilly called Glanmore's, and their rolls were fantastic. That's the thing I miss the most. That's not a secret. I tell a lot of people that.
Oh, we're almost coming to the end, Matt. So how are you going to solve this global pandemic and Strokes Association things?
I will play my part in solving the global pandemic by sticking to the rules, washing my hands, and ensure that I'm minimising all of my non-essential journeys and purchases, and all of the other guidance we're meant to do. In terms of the Stroke Association, what we're going to do is continue our work to ensure the needs of stroke survivors are understood by government, that the need for a new national plan for stroke is prioritised once we have a new Welsh Government in place, whatever colour that is. And we're going to continue our work with politicians in Wales to raise awareness of why this is so important and why actually enabling people with stroke is vital.
Well, thank you, mate, and it's been a pleasure. And keep on doing what you're doing. And I know it's a great association to work for. I can't wait to be an ambassador.
No, and I can't wait for us to have I know there's been disruptions to the ambassador training and things like that because of the pandemic, and hopefully, that'll be something that's up and running sooner rather than later.
It's planned now. I'm doing it on Zoom.
Fantastic. That's really good to hear.
So eventually, when this is over, we'll have a drink, we'll have a coffee somewhere.
Fantastic. Okay. Cheers then, Mike. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye. Well, thank you everybody for watching. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll see you next Friday. God bless. Bye.